Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 22, Text 4. Translation. That is why the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas protect each other as well as themselves, and the Lord himself, who is both the cause and effect and is yet immutable, protects them through each other. Purport. The entire social structure of Varna and Ashrama is a cooperative system meant to uplift all to the highest platform of spiritual realization. The Brahmanas are intended to be protected by the Kshatriyas, and the Kshatriyas also are intended to be enlightened by the Brahmanas. When the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas cooperate nicely, the other subordinate divisions, the Vaishyas, or mercantile people, and the Shudras, or laborer class, automatically flourish. The entire elaborate system of Vedic society was therefore based on the importance of the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas. The Lord is the real protector, but he is unattached to the affairs of protection. He creates Brahmanas for the protection of the Kshatriyas, and Kshatriyas for the protection of the Brahmanas. He remains aloof from all activities, therefore he is called Nirvikara, without activity. He has nothing to do. He is so great that he does not perform action personally, but his energies act. The Brahmanas and Kshatriyas and anything we see are different energies acting upon one another. Although individual souls are all different, the super self or super soul is the supreme personality of God. Individually, oneself may differ from others in certain qualities and may engage in different activities, such as those of a Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya. But when there is complete cooperation among different individual souls, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as Supersoul, Paramatma, being one in every individual soul, is pleased and gives them all protection. As stated before, the Brahmanas are produced from the mouth of the Lord, and the Kshatriyas are produced from the chest or arms of the Lord. If the different castes or social sections, although apparently differently occupied in different activities, nevertheless act in full cooperation, then the Lord is pleased. This is the idea of the institution of 4 Varnas and 4 Ashramas. If the members of different Ashramas and Varnas cooperate fully in Krishna consciousness, then society is well protected by the Lord without doubt. In Bhagavad Gita it is stated that the Lord is the proprietor of all different bodies. The individual soul is the proprietor of his individual body, but the Lord clearly states, "My dear Bharata, you must know that I am also Kshetrajna." Kshetrajna means the knower or proprietor of the body. The individual soul is the proprietor of the individual body, but the super soul, the personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the proprietor of all bodies everywhere. He is the proprietor not only of human bodies, but of birds, beasts, and all other living entities. Not only on this planet, but on other planets also. He is the supreme proprietor. Therefore, he does not become divided by protecting the different individual souls. He remains one and the same. That the sun appears on top of everyone's head when at the meridian does not imply that the sun becomes divided. One man thinks that the sun is on his head only, whereas 5,000 miles away, another man is thinking that the sun is only on his head. Similarly, the Supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is one, but he appears to individually oversee each individual soul. This does not mean that the individual soul and the Supersoul are one. They are one in quality as Spirit Soul, but the individual soul and Supersoul are different. Ato hyanyonyam atmanam brahmashatram churakshito rakshiti smavyayo deva saya sarasaratmako. That is why the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas protect each other, as well as themselves, and the Lord himself, who is both the cause and effect and is yet immutable, protects them through each other. So the Lord is the actual protector. We may have an understanding of others as protector, but in fact, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the real protector. Although in the Varnashram institution, the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, they protect each other. But when they are protecting each other, it is not that, in fact, the protective potency comes from the individuals involved, but rather it comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is acting through the Brahmana or the Kshatriya in order to cause protection to take place for those who are, after all, working under Krishna's social system and thus deserving to be blessed by Krishna in that social system. So, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is called Nirvikara. He's without activity. Being without activity, he has nothing to do. Natachikaryam karanam trivichite. He is not engaged in work like we are engaged in work. He is acting. He is engaged in acting, it's too loud, only for the sake of bringing the conditioned souls back to home, back to Godhead, or, in other words, to enable them to exist within their material creation in such a way that there's a possibility for them to try to fulfill their desires and at the end go back home, back to Godhead. So, his engagement is not direct. His engagement is indirect. Unless we're speaking of the incarnation of the Supreme Lord into this world, who performs activities for the sake of the upliftment of the society and for the sake of the protection of the society. In general, the Supreme Lord does not engage directly in activities within this material world. His engagement is taking place through the agency of various representatives. There are many representatives of the Supreme Lord. For instance, the demigods, they are representatives of Krishna for accomplishing the managerial purposes in the universal affairs. But there are other representatives too, who we might not consider demigods, but who are various forms of incarnation of the potency of the Lord. The Manus, for instance, are representatives of the Lord's ruling potency. There are other empowered incarnations, like Narada Muni, the incarnation of devotional service, or the Kumars, the incarnation of devotional knowledge. These are Shaktya-Vesha avatars. We also have Prithu Maharaj, whose incarnation of the partial incarnation of the ruling potency of the Lord. Even Indra, who's a partial incarnation of the lusty potency of the Lord. There are different personalities, and they all have a particular form of Krishna's energy, which they utilize for the satisfaction of the living entities in this world. There are others who represent Krishna in another way. For instance, the fire represents the mouth of the Lord, wherein he accepts ghee and grains and mantras and consumes them and gives the benefit or result to the performer of the sacrifice. Also, the sun or the moon also represent the Supreme Lord in terms that they are like the eyes of the Lord through which the effulgence of Krishna may manifest within this world for the benefit of everybody in terms of light. Then there are even less, shall we say, glorified representatives of the Lord than these entities, which are, for instance, in this earth planet, the king, who is the empowered representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, and who is to be respected like that. Then there are even less glorified personalities, for instance, fathers and mothers. They are also supposed to represent the Lord by bringing children up to the platform of Krishna consciousness, or delivering them to those who can bring them to the platform of Krishna consciousness. Similarly, you can also find that many others will be understood to be representatives of the protective potency of the Lord according to time, place, and circumstances, temporarily speaking. No need to get into such intense detail on this point. Now, Krishna's protective potency manifests throughout the whole society with the expressed goal of allowing progressive spiritual advancement to take place. In other words, the whole purpose behind Krishna's protection of others is to allow advancement of life to take place. Krishna is not giving protection just for the sake of allowing everybody to engage in their material existence. That is not Krishna's business. But rather, he's giving protection in order to accommodate the requirements of living entities who are in bodies, and at the same time allow them to get the best facility to go back home, back to God. Every living entity in a body has a requirement. And that requirement is to somehow take care of the needs of this body, yet at the end of this body, elevate one out of the cycle of birth and death, go back home, back to Godhead. So these are very real and practical needs. So Krishna gives those living entities in bodies, namely us, the possibility to satisfy these needs in a very real and practical way. That is why Krishna incarnates within this world through his Shaktis or energies for the sake of protecting the living entities so that they may progressively advance. And therefore, the Lord does not personally engage in protective activities in general, that is, accepting his incarnation when he comes himself for displaying his pastimes, but rather does it through his indirect representatives, who are more or less embodied or empowered with the energy of the Lord. Krishna himself is always enjoying. He's always engaged in the spiritual world, enjoying transcendental pastimes, enjoying with his associates, because he has nothing to do. But he will engage within this world for the sake of others, and to show a good example for the sake of others, how they too shall be engaged. That's also a form of protection. When you give a good example to others, you are protecting them from learning the wrong things. Just like when one is acting improperly, it tends to spread to others because degradation is the natural principle in this material world. Things naturally degrade. That is the nature of this world. That which is good degrades and gradually becomes bad or useless or fallen, rotten. So therefore, the good example must always be given to keep it very together. Therefore, Krishna himself will act in a very nice way, as exemplified in that chapter in Krishna book, Lord Krishna's daily activities, so that everybody else will learn to follow in a similar fashion. But when one is giving a bad example to others in general, thinking that only he is affected, in fact, he's a representative of the age of Kali, and helping others to fall down from their position of loving devotion. Therefore, the Supreme Lord also is protecting through the good example of those who follow his good example. And in this way, all good qualities can manifest in due course of time. Now, the Supreme Lord is certainly different from the individual souls, and the individual souls are certainly different from one another. One cannot say that because the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas are representatives of the Lord, they are therefore one. Because rather they are representing particular individual potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One comes from one portion of the Lord's form, another comes from the other portion of the Lord's form. Brahmanas come from the head, Kshatriyas come from the chest or arms. We find that They have different functions, they have different manifestations. Although, in fact, everything comes from Krishna, everywhere. The higher understanding is that the reason that everyone comes from Krishna, but we all come in different ways. Krishna is so infinite and full of all potencies that although everyone comes from Krishna, we are all individual and different. Because of the infinite nature of the Supreme, there are infinitely numbered, infinitesimal living entities who manifest from that Supreme in an infinite variety of fashions. There's an infinite variety of ways in which this infinite number of infinitesimal living entities may manifest. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead is infinite, and therefore His qualities must be infinite, because they seem to be divided over an infinite number of living entities. And yet, He remains full, complete, and infinitely powerful. That must mean the reservoir of qualities in which all living entities emanate, or from which all living entities emanate, must be infinitely large, without limitation. After all, that's the definition of it. Infinite means without limitation. So, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is filled in Himself with all qualities. And we, although we are manifesting everywhere throughout this whole creation, we are still within that reservoir of quality of Krishna. We are still within that reservoir of qualities of Krishna. Because everything that manifests everywhere is still within Krishna. Everything is within Him, and yet everything is different from Him. This is a simultaneous oneness and difference principle again acting. It is all within Him, and yet He remains somewhat aloof from the entire creation. Because this creation, although existing certainly within Krishna, is not Krishna Himself. And, in fact, Krishna stays in the spiritual sky, enjoying with His devotees, enjoying His pastimes, and He only engages within this material world to similarly enjoy His pastimes. He does not come here to work or perform fruitive activities for His own satisfaction, because He's already satisfied. But when He does come here, He enjoys playing with His gopi associates or cowherd boys, or He enjoys killing demons because it is a good fight. And that is very enlivening too. So Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. And therefore He acts within this world only for the sake of enjoying. But when He comes to this material world in various forms or expansions, it is for the sake of protecting the people of this world in order that they may advance in the progressive values of life, and thus gradually come to the point of being able to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in fact. So, in this purport also, Srila Prabhupada speaks about the fact that we may be the proprietor of our body. We are Kshetragya. Actually, Kshetragya does not really mean proprietor. It means he who is the knower of the body. And that implies being the proprietor. If you know completely this body, you are the knower of this body. That implies it's your body. So therefore you are the proprietor. But, in fact, you are not the proprietor, because Krishna says, Sarvakshetreshu Bharata, I am the knower of all bodies. By the same principle, Krishna is a superior knower. Therefore, He's the superior proprietor. We are the rentor or leaser of these bodies. But in fact, these bodies all are owned by Krishna, because all of the ingredients are owned by Krishna, which this body is made of. All the earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego, all of this belongs to the Lord. Therefore, this body is a creation of that So he's the real proprietor. We have rented these ingredients for some short period of time. They are in fact not ours. It is in fact not us. So the Lord, He is the knower of all bodies. He is the knower of all bodies, and He is therefore also the protector of all bodies. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, there's nothing He does not know. He knows everything about everything everywhere. And He knows us too. Vedaham samatitani vatmanani tavacharjuna bhavishami chabhutani mam tu vedana kashchana. I know everything that has happened in the past. I know everything that will happen in the future. I know everything that's happening right now. And I know all spiritual souls. But me, nobody knows. In other words, Krishna knows everything everywhere, including all bodies. Therefore, in fact, He is the supreme knowledgeable one. Supreme knowledgeable one, supreme knower, supreme controller, supreme enjoyer. Everything comes from Him. Everything is maintained by Him. Everything is absorbed from Him, absorbed within Him at the end. Janmadasayataha. That is the real meaning of this aphorism of the Vedanta Sutra. He's the source of all creation, maintenance, and annihilation, for everything comes from Him. Everything is maintained by Him, and everything is destroyed by Him ultimately at the end, for it all is absorbed back within Him. As Mahavishnu breathes in, all of this whole material manifestation is absorbed back within His breathing. And when He breathes out, all the universes come out from the pores of His skin. And while the universes are in existence, in this very short period of time, Krishna manifests in unlimited varieties of ways in order to allow the protection and maintenance of this creation to continue. Therefore, when Vyasadeva began his writing of the Srimad Bhagavatam, after it had been spoken by various authorities in different ways, and finally spoken by Sutta Goswami in Kurukshetra, Naimisharanya, then we find that he starts off with the same words that start off the Vedanta Sutra. Janmadasya tanvayadi tarachastatya shabhagyasarat tene brahma hridayadi kavaye muyanti yat suraya. Again, he begins with this same point, which is that Krishna is the creator, maintainer, annihilator, and yet, to expand that further, He is a personality who is independent, all cognizant, who is the original trainer of Lord Brahma, giving him all Vedic knowledge, and who is himself the source of all Vedic knowledge. That personality is beyond this entire material creation. Even Sripad Shankaracharya admits that, Narayana Pero Vaktat. He is para. He is beyond this material existence. We are also para prakriti. But, although we are para prakriti, and we are beyond this material world, we are contaminated by this material world, trapped by the material world, by our own desires. Because we wish to be. Yatedam daryate jagat. We like to exploit this material nature. We enjoy this position within the material nature as enjoyers or controllers. Therefore, we stay very happily wrapped up in the material existence. So at the point at which we actually surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, at that time we will actually begin to develop our progressive path back home, back to Godhead, out of this material world, back to the spiritual world where we belong. So this spiritual existence is one which is to be attained. No one should ever think he should like to stay in the material world just because something's very nice right now. Everything that is good now becomes bad, and everything that is bad becomes good again in a later on way. Some transformations of the material nature are there, good and bad are there. These two things, happiness and distress, often translated as good and bad, are two ditches of material existence. Very deep ditches. Sometimes we fall into the ditch of happiness, thinking it very nice. But then we have to climb ourselves out of that ditch, and we fall into the ditch of distress. And we think that is not very nice at all. These ditches of happiness and distress are there, and the living entity is captured within these deep ditches. And sometimes he's captured by his own desire. It's like when we fall into the ditch of happiness. We think, this is very nice. Especially if that ditch is filled with stool. The stool pit of the material existence. We think, ooh, is this good? Just like the hogs in the material world are very much happy to dive into a puddle of mud and just squish themselves into it and cover their eyes with their ears and go to sleep. So similarly, we also feel very, very comfortable in this deep pit of material happiness, which gives us great bliss. Temporarily, and then sometimes we are thrown into the pit of suffering condition, and we are suffering even more because of what we lost. We feel so much disturbed to have lost all our nice so-called happiness of this material world. Happiness and distress, these are both attachment in different degrees. Therefore, one should learn the principles of detachment from this material world so that one is not agitated when he's happy or agitated when he's distressful. One should be situated in sameness or equanimity of mind. Sama. These are one of the Brahminical qualities. Sama and Dhamma. And Ajavam, Titiksham, Satcham, Socham. All kinds of devotional activities. All of these very nice activities in total make one's realization of the spiritual nature very complete. It begins with sama, control of the mind. Equanimity, sameness, not being agitated by the dualities of this material existence. Happiness and distress, up and down, hot and cold. All of these good and bad feelings, which are nothing but speculations. In fact, the different ditches of material existence, known as good and bad, happiness and distress, are mere mental speculations. Because in fact, nothing's good in this material world. Everything in this world is bad because in fact, it's separated from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So if we wish to come to the point of intelligence, we should free ourselves from all conceptions of good or bad in this world and situate ourselves in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and become satisfied. So we will leave all of you with that. We're now going to have an initiation ceremony for some devotees, which should be quickly set up. Some seats and all that stuff. Just now coming. Those who have essential activities to perform may go do them as you like. The rest of us shall chant Hare Krishna. Some brahmanas can read, one brahmana for each corner, 4 brahmanas with the book of Srila Prabhupada, reading out loud throughout the whole ceremony. Everybody else chanting Hare Krishna mantra with great enthusiasm. Those who are to be initiated may kindly present themselves to the priest. All right, Bhakta Marek. The Marek who's not from Dabrawa. This is Dabrawa. Who's not from? Doesn't matter. Go ahead. He is the one who comes from that place. Oh, that's a name. All right. What are the 4 regulative principles you will follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day? All right, your name is Mahaguyadas. All right, other lyrics. What are the 4 regulative principles you will follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day without fail? Okay, your name is Mahaharidas. Alexander. What are the 4 regulative principles you will follow for the rest of your life? Say it in Polish. And how many rounds every day? Okay. Your name is Achaladas. Tomek. What are the 4 regulative principles you will follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds chanting of Hare Krishna mantra without fail every day? Okay. Your name is Tapo Lokani Vasudas. Don't worry, I will give the sheet. You can. That's a big one. Tapo Lokani Vasudas. Okay. Peter from Warsaw. What are the 4 regulative principles you will follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds? Every day, without fail. Okay, your name is Paravyoma Das. Alex from, what is this word? Is that Krakow or someplace else? Well, who makes the K like that? What are the 4 regulative principles you will follow for every day for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day without fail? Okay, your name is Achyuta Grajadas. Peter from Krakow. What are the 4 regulative principles you will follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day without fail? Okay. Your name is Paradeya Das. Miroslav? What are the 4 regulative principles you will follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day without fail? Okay. Your name is Mahanidhi Das. Hawkins? What are the 4 regular principles you follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day without fail? Okay. Your name is Hamsa Vapuda. Soren? What are the 4 regular principles you will follow for the rest of your life? And how many rounds every day without fail? Okay, your name is Shankarbrit Das. Mr. Singh? What are the 4 regular principles you will follow for the rest of your life? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Just meat, huh? Oh, right, that's all right. Just checking. And how many rounds every day without fail? All right. And what is the 5th regulative principle? Huh? Reading? Huh? Reading? Just reading. Look. All right. Did I ask you how many rounds? Okay, very good. Your name is Srinivasacharya Das. It's tricky when I ask for the fifth one.